Welcome to Wonderland Unlocked. I'm Courtney, a certified peer support specialist, and this is Series 2, Through the Rabbit Hole, the beginning of self-discovery. I've fallen down my own rabbit hole, questioning everything along the way. Now, I'm here to support you as you explore the unknown, challenge what you believe, and uncover who you really are. Take a deep breath. The rabbit hole is waiting. Let's unlock Wonderland together.
Alice, sweetheart, it's time for tea. Alice. Alice.
Welcome back to Wonderland Unlocked, where we are going down the rabbit hole into something that I know all too well. The war in your mind. Those relentless, exhausting battles that seem to take place inside of us, often without warning. It's the fight between who we are and who we think we should be, between our past and our future, between our emotions and our logic. For years, I was at war with myself, and for a long time, I thought I was losing. But what if I told you that the real battle isn't about winning or losing? What if freedom doesn't come from fighting harder, but from learning how to stop fighting altogether? In this episode, we're going to be exploring what these internal battles really are and why they happen, the science behind why our minds turn against us, how to recognize when you're stuck in an internal war, the emotional toll and the impact on our mental health, strategies to break free and find inner peace, and of course, my own personal journey with this battle. Let's start by defining what an internal battle actually is. It's that constant push and pull inside your mind. Fear versus courage, self-doubt versus confidence, past trauma versus future hope. These battles can manifest in so many ways: overthinking, self-criticism, emotional suppression, or even just feeling completely stuck. For me, this war started when I was young. I remember lying awake at night, replaying every single mistake I made that day, every word I shouldn't have said. My mind was both the attacker and the victim, constantly tearing itself apart. And the worst part, I thought that was normal. But it turns out there's a reason our minds do this. Our brains are wired for survival. From an evolutionary standpoint, we've been programmed to anticipate threats, solve problems, and adapt our environment. But when the external threats lessen, our brains don't just shut off. Instead, they often turn inward, searching for things to analyze, fix, or prepare for. This is where the internal battle begins. Think of it like a battlefield with two opposing sides, both of which are you. One part of you is driven by fear, rooted in past experiences and doubts, whispering that you're not good enough or that something will go wrong. The other part of you fights back, pushing forward with hope and the belief that things can change. But the war rages on because neither side fully wins. You're stuck in this mental tug of war, drained and unsure which voice to listen to. For years, I believed that if I just worried enough, I could prevent bad things from happening. That if I replayed my mistakes over and over again, I would somehow undo them. But all that did was trap me in a cycle of overthinking and self-blame. I wasn't fixing anything. I was just exhausting myself. And here's the thing. The more we engage in this battle, the stronger it gets. The neural pathways that fuel our internal conflicts become more deeply ingrained the more we reinforce them. That's why these patterns feel so impossible to break free from. They've become our default setting. So, how do we start to shift this? The first step is awareness. We have to recognize when we're caught in the cycle of mental warfare. When we can separate ourselves from the battle, we can step back and observe our thoughts instead of being consumed by them. We create the possibility of change. Instead of being the soldier in the war, we can become the strategist. We can assess the battlefield, identify the triggers, and start finding ways to navigate our thoughts rather than being controlled by them. This war in our minds is exhausting, but it's not unbeatable. Our brains are wired for survival, and survival means anticipating danger, real or imagined. The part of our brain responsible for fear and emotional responses is always scanning for threats, and when there's no external threat, it creates an internal one. This is why we obsess over past mistakes, why we second-guess ourselves, why we feel like we're never enough. It's our brain's way of keeping us safe, but safe doesn't always mean happy. Science shows that the self-sabotage is often linked to childhood experiences, trauma, and deeply ingrained belief systems. If you grew up feeling like you had to earn love or prove your worth, your brain internalized that struggle, and even when you're safe, it keeps replaying the battle. But self-sabotage doesn't just show up in obvious ways. Sometimes it's disguised as procrastination, putting off things we want to do just because deep down we're afraid of failure or even success. Other times, it appears as perfectionism, the relentless need to meet impossible standards so we never have to feel not good enough. It can also show up in relationships where we push people away before they can leave us, reinforcing the false belief that we are unlovable. What's fascinating is that neuroscience suggests that we are not doomed to this cycle forever. The brain is neuroplastic, meaning it can rewire itself. Just because we've been operating in survival mode doesn't mean we have to stay there. We can train our minds to stop perceiving success, happiness, and self-acceptance as threats. The key is recognizing when self-sabotage is happening and interrupting the pattern. This might mean challenging the thoughts that tell us we're not enough. It could mean embracing discomfort instead of avoiding it, or allowing ourselves to be vulnerable in relationships despite the fear. When we start to reframe the self-sabotaging thoughts as outdated defense mechanisms rather than truths, we begin to reclaim control. Sometimes we don't even realize we're fighting. The battle is so ingrained in us that it feels like background noise. But here's how to recognize it. You overthink to the point of exhaustion. You constantly feel guilty even when you've done nothing wrong. You battle between what you want and what you think you should do. You suppress emotions instead of processing them. You're stuck in a cycle of self-criticism. You sabotage opportunities for growth or happiness because deep down you don't feel worthy. You struggle to trust your own decisions, always second-guessing yourself. You feel disconnected from your own needs, unsure of what you truly want. For me, I knew I was at war when I started feeling emotionally numb. The exhaustion of constant internal conflict drained me until I couldn't feel anything at all. And that's not like me. I always feel everything. It was like I had fought so many battles inside of my mind that I had nothing left to give. The weight of self-doubt, guilt, and overthinking became overwhelming, leaving me stuck in a fog of detachment. And the tricky part, this state of internal warfare can feel normal when it's all you've ever known. But recognizing it is the first step to breaking free. The more we become aware of the ways we fight ourselves, the more we can start to challenge those patterns and choose a different path. The cost of living in constant battle mode is high. It leads to anxiety, depression, disassociation, and even physical symptoms like fatigue and headaches. The stress of always fighting yourself creates a toxic cycle. Your body stays in perpetual state of stress, releasing cortisol and adrenaline, which over time can weaken your immune system, disrupt your sleep, and leave you feeling completely drained. You might notice difficulty concentrating, frequent illness, or even unexplained muscle pain. It's your body's way of saying, I can't keep fighting like this. And let's be real, there were times I didn't think I'd survive it. Because when your own mind feels like the enemy, how do you escape? The answer isn't in fighting harder, but in learning how to step out of the battle. It means recognizing that not every thought deserves a reaction. Not every emotion is a call to war. It means finding moments of stillness amidst the chaos, learning self-compassion, and allowing yourself the grace to heal. For me, stepping out of the battle started with acknowledging that I was exhausted, that I didn't have to keep punishing myself for the past or constantly prove my worth. It was about realizing that rest is not weakness and that seeking peace isn't giving up. It's choosing to live. I had to learn how to shift my perspective, how to stop seeing every challenge as an attack and start viewing it as an opportunity for growth. Another huge realization was how this constant warfare affected my relationships. When you're always in a defensive state, you push people away without even meaning to. I found myself misinterpreting harmless comments as criticism, bracing for rejection, even when it wasn't there, and struggling to trust even the people who truly cared. The walls I built to protect myself only isolated me further. Stepping out of that cycle required a lot of unlearning. I had to confront the fears that kept me stuck, the deep-seated beliefs that had told me I wasn't good enough unless I was constantly proving myself. I had to start practicing self-compassion, learning to sit with the discomfort instead of reacting out of fear or self-loathing. And here's the thing. Healing isn't about erasing the battle scars. It's about learning to live with them without letting them define you. It's about creating space for joy, for rest, for connection. It's about allowing yourself to be a whole person, not just a soldier in a never-ending war. So how do we end this war? Awareness. Recognizing when you're in battle mode. This means paying attention to the way your thoughts spiral, the tension in your body, and the emotions that come up when you feel attacked, even if the threat is internal. A big part of awareness is simply noticing when your mind is dragging you into another fight. Radical acceptance. Accepting that these thoughts and feelings exist without judgment. This doesn't mean you like them or agree with them, but you acknowledge that they're there. Fighting against them only gives them more power. Acceptance creates space for change. Self-compassion. Replacing self-criticism with self-kindness. If you wouldn't say it to your friend, why say it to yourself? I had to learn to offer myself grace, to recognize that mistakes and struggles don't define my worth. The more I nurtured kindness towards myself, the weaker my inner critic became. Mindfulness, learning to observe thoughts without engaging in them. Thoughts are just thoughts. They're not commands. They're not truths. They're not destiny. I had to train myself to watch them come and go like clouds in the sky, rather than getting caught in the storm. Reframing. Challenging and changing destructive thought patterns. Instead of immediately believing my negative thoughts, I started questioning them. Is this really true? Is there another way to look at this? Over time, I began rewriting the narrative in my mind. One of the biggest shifts for me was learning that I didn't have to engage with every thought. Just because my mind said something didn't mean it was true. I started asking myself, is this not helping me or hurting me? If it was hurting me, I reminded myself that I had a choice. I could let it pass without giving it power. Breaking free from the war in your mind is a process, not an overnight transformation. But every time you choose awareness over reactivity, compassion over criticism, and presence over fear, you're taking back control. Here are some coping strategies that helped me. Grounding techniques. Engaging in the 5 senses to bring myself back to the present. I would focus on what I could see, touch, hear, smell, and taste, reminding myself that I was safe in the moment. It was a way of anchoring myself when my mind started to spiral. Opposite action. Doing the opposite of what my inner critic told me. If my mind insisted that I isolate, I reached out to a friend. If it told me I was worthless, I engaged in an activity that made me feel capable and strong. The more I pushed back against the negative instincts, the less power they had over me. Breathing exercises. Regulating my nervous system through deep breathing. I discovered that when I slowed my breath, I could slow my thoughts. Techniques like box breathing help calm my racing mind and reset my body's stress response. Self-talk scripts. Rewriting the narratives in my head. Instead of letting my thoughts run on autopilot, I started countering them with an intentional, compassionate responses. When I thought I'm a failure, I reminded myself I'm learning and growing. When I felt overwhelmed, I reassured myself I have handled hard things before, and I can handle this too. Therapy and DBT skills. Learning tools to navigate emotions effectively. Therapy gave me a structured way to process my thoughts, and dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, taught me practical skills for emotional regulation, distress tolerance, and mindfulness. Applying these skills consistently helped me break free from destructive cycles and create a healthier relationship in my mind. Finding peace isn't about silencing the mind. It's about learning to listen differently. It's about recognizing that thoughts are just thoughts, not absolute truths, and that I have the power to choose which ones deserve my attention. It's a journey, and some days will be harder than others. But every small step towards peace is a victory worth celebrating. My breakthrough came when I stopped seeing my mind as the enemy. I started treating myself with the same compassion I gave to others. I allowed myself to feel without shame. I stopped defining myself by my past. And I reminded myself daily that I deserved peace. But getting to that point wasn't easy. At first, self-compassion felt foreign, almost like a language I didn't even know how to speak. I had spent so many years criticizing myself that kindness felt unnatural. I had to start small, changing the way that I talked to myself, challenging negative thoughts, and allowing space for imperfection. Instead of tearing myself down for making mistakes, I reminded myself that growth comes from learning, not punishment. I also learned to let go of the need for control. So much of my inner conflict came from trying to force life to fit into a mold, to control every possible outcome. But life isn't something to be conquered. It's something to be experienced. The more I let go, the more I found peace. It wasn't overnight, and some days I still catch myself falling into old battles. There are moments when the old narratives creep back in, whispering doubts and fears. But now, I know how to step out of them. I remind myself that thoughts are not facts, and I am not my past, and that every day is another chance to choose peace. And that's what I want for you too. I want for you to know that you are not broken. You are not beyond healing. You are capable of finding peace within yourself, no matter how loud the battles in your mind have been. It takes time, patience, and practice, but I promise it's worth it. This war doesn't define you. You are not broken. You are not your intrusive thoughts, and you don't have to fight forever. If today's episode resonated with you, I encourage you to try one small step, just one. Maybe that's writing down your self-critical thoughts and countering them with kindness. Maybe it's practicing one mindful breath. Maybe it's just reminding yourself that you are worthy of peace. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, take care of your mind, take care of your heart, and remember, you are never alone in Wonderland.